Welcome, everyone. Peace and love from the Atlantean consciousness, your beacon of bright white light in a dark sewer of a reality. This is Grand Master Dr. Thor Templar, and I'm going to be your guide as usual through the amazing, mystical, and really the only thing in life that really matters when it comes down to it, and that is the journey through the occult sciences. Everything else is fleeting, everything else is materialistic, based in the rotting flesh and atropic nature of the world, all but the occult sciences, which are empowered and growing all the time and never cease in a universe of darkness. It is the light. What I'm going to cover here is what I consider Foundation 6, which I haven't written as of yet, and I will be publishing and updating the last 3 foundations, which are not in print yet, sometime. But that certainly is on the table to do. But the 6th foundation, which I haven't put down in any manner whatsoever, is a very important one that is part of your occult science being, and a very important tool that you need to use and will use and should use in your life daily. And that's divination and dowsing. Sense dowsing is the primarily what you're going to use dowsing for, but you can get into divination as well. But divination, when you're using pendulums or instruments other than using oracles, really work on more of a sensing level than a spiritual connection level. And we'll cover that in a minute, and that's important to understand because, as usual, nobody knows nothing and has been trained wrong, and everybody's confused. The old cliche is the blind leading the blind in many instances, but it's basically nobody leading nobody. So, beyond that, a little bit of wisdom. Being connected and knowing what's happening in your life is important. And trying to project into the future and finding out what's going on or getting information about something that's going to take place, is taking place, testing the honesty of someone you may be dealing with. All these things are very important, and there are many tools that you can use to guide yourself and guide your life. And while your inner magical being ultimately will take over and assist you, again, it's this problem with becoming a voice in your head and you becoming psychotic and guiding and directing you, and that's what tools are for. So if you use runes or tarot cards or other things, your inner magical being is assisting the process to make sure you get the information in a humanly acceptable manner. People popping up around you like a bad movie, talking, hearing voices in your head is certainly not going to assist you in any manner whatsoever. It's basically a feeling and understanding, which as you become a strong occult scientist turns into some very strong messages to the point of actually hearing voices in your head, because that is not productive. But using all sorts of tools, and I've never been a giant fan of astrology because it doesn't work that well with me because I'm a very predestined person, but still can be helpful to some aspects to be used as a bigger picture model, and then see if it works for you, and then see if the smaller pictures is much more important in your life as you become connected to power streams and you start getting very potent information. The bigger picture of astrology, a lot of things can be done online now. There's computer programs, or if you can find somebody who's good, who knows what they're doing, it's worth investing in that to get the bigger picture. And these are things that are done yearly, and I don't know anybody, so don't ask me. But These can be sought out. There are many, and again, we go into the minefield of what are these people any good, and are they just pushing a computer button to generate money for themselves and just sending you a printout that you could have got yourself? You can probably find a lot of stuff online for free. But I do recommend it to others. I don't do it personally, as I said, because of my unique situation. I use other divinations, which I'll talk about. But it can be helpful in your life, and then you have to see. You should really keep those. You know, it's like keeping the old National Enquirer after January 15th, when you get all these predictions, and looking at it at the following year, January 15th of the next year, and to see if any of these came correct. And when you do stuff like that, you find out how incorrect all these things are. And it's the same thing you can find out with your astrology. What did they tell you? Now, the problem with all divination, using runes, cards, or anything else, is that there tends to be a subconscious direction towards the result that you get. Meaning if that says it's a bad day, you make it a bad day. And this is a problem that we have to be very careful with the entire process of these things. And like any good researcher, you have to be on guard not to manifest what has been told to you are guideposts. And generally that's what all these things are, guideposts, other than using a pendulum for sensing energies. Those are not guideposts. And that's important to understand. When you're sensing something, you are getting a actual figure or scientific understanding or measuring of something that you have to take seriously. But of course, you know, there's personal preferences there and prejudices that you have to be careful of as well. And that's one of the problems with all the occult sciences, because it is based in the very changing and the constant flux of life in general and yourself, that you have to be careful with the actual making things happen as your reading states it's going to happen, instead of using it as a signpost of, well, this is something to watch out for. Now, there are many different divination systems out there, from Ouija boards to runes to tarot cards, which are the three most prevalent ones. And of course, there are hundreds of types of tarot card decks. And to a certain extent, rightfully so, because you need to find an oracle that you tap into and understand. And I think in some previous audio I mentioned this somewhat, but this is a very critical area. And the idea is that, you know, with the great misconception that Tibetan Buddhism, everything else is so wonderful and everything else, I got a Tibetan oracle system. And of course, since I really didn't understand the god forms that they were using and was not into Tibetan philosophies and realities past the fact of doing this, it was not an easy form to use. So I couldn't connect with it, and of course I didn't get any decent results with it because I really didn't understand it, and they talk about this god or that god or this energy. So it's important to pick a form, and there are tarot decks that anything else from King Arthur to the Necronomicon to pretty much you name it. I mean, they have absolutely everything, and they're quite beautiful. I had a tarot card deck collection in the past. They're works of art. One's based on Da Vinci. You name it, it is out there. And they have a tarot card. So you have to, if you want to get to learn and start using tarot cards, you have to find a deck that you resonate with. A lot of people get the classic Rider-Waite because that's very neutral. I tend to tell people not to get that deck. Find something that you're more into. If you're into whatever it is and have an interest in that, I tell people to find something in that. There's Egyptian decks, there's Celtic decks, there's voodoo decks. So there's all sorts of these things that if you prefer, it's good to do that, because having a feel and an energy and liking to deal with something is important. And the problem with the Rider-Waite deck is that it's vanilla ice cream. It's good, you can use it, but it ain't Rocky Road. So the bottom line is that you have to find something that you can key into and understand. If you get a deck of the Nordic gods and so forth, well, if you don't have much of an interest in them and don't know the difference between Odin and Freya, then what do you actually understand about that? So you're not going to understand the system, so why would you do something like that? So you've got to get into something that you relate to or can relate to or can understand what the meaning of that and there. And I'm not going to go into the history of it because tarot doesn't really come from ancient times or based on anything else. It came from a card game that developed into what it is today out of France. And it's I'm not even sure, it's a few hundred years old, something like that. But it doesn't really matter. There are lots and lots of oracles that you can use out there. And as you said, this is different than dowsing, which is sensing, instead of something which is getting direction and more interpretation, which is divination is. So you're dealing more with spirit guides and spirit help than you are with something like dowsing, which you're dealing more with physical energies, the subatomic particle energies that you're picking up by using your entire body as this giant computer sensor, so to speak. So you got to get something you resonate with, and you don't have to stay with anything because you got one. If you have a tarot Rider-Waite deck and you use that for a while, you can always change to something else or have several decks. It doesn't matter. Whatever you relate to better. And there are other oracles out there. There are bone oracles, there's different systems in general. I mean, there's endless amounts of oracles that if you go to a bookstore, you can look around and maybe you'll find something that you find more appealing. One of the most popular out there, of course, are the runes. This started with Ralph Blum. I'm not sure the exact year he did it, but around 1980, or in the early 80s, he came out with the Book of Runes. And this was a system of how to use runes for divination, and it was published as a nice little book, and it came with a set of runes in a bag, and it's a great little book to start off with, and it's very neutral in the fact it doesn't have a lot of pseudo Viking or Odinist philosophies in it that most people are not into, but it uses a form of divination of 24 different runes that when picked out have different meanings. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It doesn't take a lot of study. You can simply shake the bag, put your hand in the bag, and pick out a rune when you want an answer to something, and that'll give you a particular trend towards that. So runes are a great oracle to use. It's what I started out with. I've never used tarot cards. I was never really drawn to them. I was drawn to the runes and was a system that I used quite a lot and still do to this day. So it just depends. It resonates with me. I like it. The tarot cards don't. And there are other systems to use. And I mean, it's pretty much endless. Tarot cards tend to be a little more complicated, and I think there's a little bit too much interpretation with them. While the runes are a little more straightforward. I should say a lot more straightforward. Runes have particular meanings, and all of these things don't generally have 100% yes or no, and you can use things like that. I mean, you can pick a card out of the tarot deck and use it as a yes or no card if you want to. Of course, again, that's interpretation. You can do the same thing with the runes, a little more clearer, and but there is a little bit too much interpretation there. But, millions of people use the tarot and love it. And as I said, you got to find what you like. It's not that one is better than the other at all. It's what you resonate with. It's just kind of as simple as that. But as I said, find something you're interested in. And as you said, the runes are pretty much probably one of the most popular systems out there. That book has been a bestseller since it came out. And it continues to be in the top 10 selling metaphysical books, I think, to this day. I haven't checked in the last few years, but even 10, 15 years later, that book is selling like crazy. And I think it's selling like crazy because it is so easy to use and simple and straight to the point. So, and the Blum book, you can get so many out there on rune divination. They're all about the same. They're all good. And you can make your own runes very simply because the runes are easy to make. And you can do it that way yourself. Some people think making their own runes is better. Some people like to buy... they have runes made out of crystals or stones that are polished of different types. Those are popular. I have a few sets of those myself. I have the regular ones from Bloom and other people, but there's a lot of little kits you may be able to find someplace inexpensively right in the bigger stores. I know Barnes & Noble had these kits, and you can also often find them where they have a book and they have runes with it, and it just makes it very easy than going out and making your own and so forth. And while there is some intrinsic power in making your own, and because you get connected with the oracle better, using pre-made ones are okay too. And so again, that's something that is personal to you. But for years, of course, being originally a person who was more involved in Odinistic and systems, which I consider ultimately Atlantean systems and not the debased Nordic and Germanic systems. But Blum always came out as to be kind of the milquetoast New Age guy, and nobody liked him. But it is not really true. It's a great little system. It's a great little set, and but he's not the last word on it. Any book on runic divination, and you make sure it's on divination, I've never found to be bad. Other more complicated works by so-called people like Edred Thorson, aka Edred Flowers, who's a hardcore Satanist, I tell people to stay away from. This has nothing to do with their perverse, sick little system that those people are into. So you're better off getting a book by Blum or someone else that is more New Agey, middle of the road, so they haven't put their filth into it. And as I said, look for kits that are on sale and what's happening that's going on. Who knows what comes out? I see them pop up every once in a while in different places or even online. You can get a little kit if you want to go that way. But that's just one way. There's Bonard oracles. I've seen everything. You can use regular playing cards. You can use dice. I mean, all these have their validities to them. I don't like those because they're common tools, dice, regular playing cards. I mean, you can use them in the same way, but you kind of lose the mystique of the practice when you do things well. It's the same thing that you use to play with, or you do a gambling. I mean, it doesn't have the kind of aura that you should have when doing a divination practice, which is the fact of actually getting into the mindset, which is so important that I always talk about, the trancing out that's so needed, that, you know, you're doing something special here. A tarot deck is special. Look at it. It's unusual. You're not going to use that for anything. You're not going to use that as a coaster, I hope. It's going to be kept in a nice little bag. A lot of them come with, and it's just in general gives you a hold. Just like the runes, obviously, they're special items to use for special things. And that's important. So using playing cards, using dice is not the way to go. But there are other systems you may be interested in, and if you have a particular background that you favor. One of the things that everybody does, and I tell people to stay away from it, and even though I went through the same things, is people connecting to their cultural backgrounds to a large extent, and they get too much into their own things when there really isn't cultures and people. There's only Atlanteans and non-Atlanteans, and that's what there is out there. The rest of these things are set up to separate you, and people who align themselves with groups of anything are idiots because there are no good groups. But you have to find something that you just like. I relate to this. I like it. It's Celtic. Grandma was from Ireland. Whatever it means to you that you think you like that, that's your personal choice. And to some extent, that can assist the process. Now, using tarot cards and the whole divination area is something that you need to get used to and comfortable with. And one of the problems with doing any divination when you are at times of great stress and great need is that there tends to be a huge problematic error situation because your whole body's freaking out. Your mind is coming in telling you all sorts of problems. Your inner magical being's trying to fight its way through. You tend to get very bad results. So you want to do things for daily life. And generally when you do things for daily life, you get accustomed to the systems, then you find out and are given hints that there may be bad things coming, things you have to watch out about, etc. If you have a real urgent or problematic issue, it's always good to have somebody else read for you in times of great stress or trouble because you're too emotionally involved, and as such, you will get wrong readings. But in the day-to-day things, the average things, this is what a good divination system can help you with. If you're getting involved with somebody or something or going to make a business contract, well, it's a good idea to pull some runes on that or make a tarot reading. You know what? And the whole idea is not to get too carried away with it, that this is the actual voice of God telling you exactly what's going to happen. What you're picking up with is, it's very much like magic. Magic works with you, not for you. And magic gives you an edge. It doesn't make things happen. So the whole idea of when you get a reading is you're getting a trend. Well, this looks good. This looks bad. And these are trends that you need to pay attention to. And of course, you should write this stuff down or remember it, whatever you do, and follow to see how correct you are. I found that my practices, that these readings are shockingly correct. And it almost becomes a problem where your life starts to get based on this, and I pulled away from it many years ago because of that. The fact is that are you doing what the runes tell you to do, or are you using them as tools of trends? And it's very important that you keep things in the trends. And this is where always everybody has problems. So, because it can get to the fact that if you do daily readings is that you will make sure that things come out like the reading is instead of using it as a signpost. So it's a signpost, it's a trend. This is coming up, but it isn't exactly what's going to happen. There's a lot of factors in life, and as such, these factors influence things. So that's one thing you have to be careful with any divination system, is it doesn't start to run your life. Oh, and I forget, of course, one of the most popular ones for many, many years, I don't know if it still is the I Ching. I Ching, this was huge in the late 70s, and everybody had I Ching stuff, everybody had the books and everything else, and here's another system. And of course, all divination systems are open to interpretation, and they're meant to be. If everything was black and white in a divination system, it wouldn't make very much sense. So again, it has to talk about trends. It has to talk about things that you then interpret of what's happening in your life, and that's how systems work. You have to interpret the information to fit into your system, because the system isn't all about your life, and it has to give general information that everybody can use. So again, it's about trends, and it's general information that you then hone through your inner magical being and get the answers that you actually need for your particular life. So, you've got to look for the trend of it. There are things that are black and white, issues as well, and a good tapped into a divinator, someone, when you get good at divination, you will then be able to get better and more precise information. It's just like magic and everything else. You build power with it. Nothing is instantaneous. It's something that works through your inner magical being, and it's something that you develop over time. Because we're in this whole sensing area, and basically you're doing all sorts of things here when it comes to the occult sciences that were not meant to be done by the ape man stupid society that we live in. So the whole idea is you're constantly fighting that. And So it takes time with everything else. And, you have to kind of measure the accuracy rate of things. And then as you do divination for over periods of time, you find out, it's been very accurate. 60, 70% right. So when you do divination again, you say, well, this trend looks like it is right. So that's how you base things to see how it goes. But, if we all could have a device which would tell us what the future was, then we can change things, and that future which is not written in stone. Some people think it is. I don't. I believe the future is based on a fluid reality, and if you do something different now, your future will change. But if you look at the future where you are at this particular moment, and when I do readings and everything else, people need to understand that, and I try and let people know that at this particular moment, the course you're on is over the cliff, let's say. So you're driving down, and the road ahead is leading you right off the cliff. Now, if you know this, and you're on that road, well, what are you going to do? Well, you don't stay on that road. You make a right, and you go off that road onto another road, and guess what? Your whole future's changed. So that's how these areas can be very important and a great guide for you. As I said, the concern is that you draw these runes or these cards, and they tell you to do something, and you start, instead of looking at them as trends, you take them as commands, and then you start to act out what that is. So you have to be very careful of that. But, it's always good if you can judge people. Is this guy trustworthy? Is this going to follow through? Is this going to happen? Is this a good doctor? Is this a good lawyer? The whole idea is that if you know, instead of going in a stupid fashion, just as you want to do with magic, the magic is about empowering your life. You don't do anything and let the fates do it. You do something and you empower it in a simple, direct, and effective way. That's what the next level occultism is all about. Life is really about being a flag or a flagpole. You want to be a flagpole. People get caught up in the glamour of life thinking that the flag is really what is important, when in the end it's the flagpole that's important, that is direct and solid, not flopping in the wind or as fates decide which direction it's going to blow or move, or if it does at all. A flag without a flagpole is nothing but a piece of cloth on the ground. So you want to be a flagpole. You want to be the strength that keeps everything going and directed. And when you blend this into your magical practices, you can see how if you're working to things that are problems and you know they're problems, or you have some foretelling that this is a bad situation, and you have developed yourself to the level, you have to go with that. The problem with most people is they tend to back out. Well, this is just colorism, I don't know. It's nice, but I'm not going to bet on it. Well, that is being a coward and going against your inner magical being. You have to, if you get negative readings on a person, place, or thing, you get the hell out of there and you get away from those people, persons, or things, and you move on regardless of the pain and stress that doing that may encompass, because it's going to be a lot less pain and stress if you do it now than you wait in the future and you get into a situation where you're over your head in many different ways and you never get out of it. Too many people are very happy to be in quicksand, and the slow process of sinking is appearance of stability until it encompasses you and you are history. But it's a fantastic tool to use and to key into it. And you key into it and use it as you do it daily. And it doesn't have to be a major issue. Try a whole bunch of little things that you want to test. Maybe if it's going to a movie or an event, and you can ask, well, is this going to be a good movie? Divine that. Go to the movie and see if you're right. So It's as simple as that. And since there are a lot of interpretations with the runes and with tarot cards and any other systems, the I Ching, all of these things are up to a lot of interpretation. So this is where the inner magical being, the all-important aspect of your real consciousness, your real Atlantean consciousness, your non-ape being reality, as you key into all this, you're going to get better and better at it, like everything else. And that's just, that's just life. Life is about getting comfortable, doing things repetitively, so that you get away from the nervousness, you get away from the mind coming in and telling you, oh, shucks, it's no bad, it's bad, don't trust it. If you do things on a consistent basis, the mind tends to get bored, steps out of the way, and the inner magical being rushes in. And this is something that you just will acquire over time, like everything else. It would be nice if everything was learned quickly and understood at deep levels. And even if you were programmed like a Matrix type movie where I can do tarot now, that would not give you the sensory abilities that you learn from doing something. Knowing what the cards are is only part of it. Interpreting them correctly is all of it. And that is not something that can be learned in, quote, letters and words, or dollars and cents, as the cliche goes. It's not that simple. These are processes that are consciousness based, and those are something that's never going to be able to be programmed into you. You may be able to be a math genius, you may be able to do something in some way, and you can implant a book into you, a book of architecture, a book of how to build something, but taking the book knowledge and applying it in life has always been something that has been talked about as dubious. Those that can't teach, and what's on the blackboard doesn't necessarily work in the real world. So this is a process that you have to do. Now, divination, as I said, works in a very particular manner, which is very different than dowsing. And dowsing, I will make a separate audio on to cover that, because that's a big topic in itself. So this will be part 1 of divination, and part 2 will be dowsing. Now, divination works with guidance of higher consciousness, the inner magical being, and the contact of higher spiritual energies that you contact through, as usual, through the streams of knowledge that you've been either connected to or have developed. And so you're getting this higher knowledge that's coming to you through these processes and assisting you. And again, if somebody popped up in front of you and say, well, don't go out tomorrow, it's a bad day. The bottom line is that people could not handle that, so it doesn't work like that. Life is much too more complicated. Secondly, life is not meant to be that cut and dry. If everything in life is cut and dry, then why bother living? If everybody had piles of money in their pockets, money would have no value anymore. And of course, it goes on that if life was easy and there were no battles and nothing to overcome and no stresses, nobody would ever develop. We become the most decadent, lazy society we possibly could be. And we see signs of that happening in some groups already. But having a life that is perfect is not a life that's going to teach you anything. And of course, there are the scales of what I consider of people who end up suffering. And I don't think suffering teaches anyone. So, the whole idea is to stay away from suffering. Hardships, problems, damn right you need those in your life, and you're going to be forced. You're going to be taken by the back of the neck. You're going to be slammed into the ground. You're going to be kicked and stepped on. And that, in many instances, depending on whom you are in the situation, is vital to your growth as a being. And without it, you're just a dumb, stupid idiot that did what daddy told you to do in the newspapers and buy into the system, and that ends up into the pothole, the latrine trench of life that we have made as humans now. So that is critical. When that turns into suffering, it serves no purpose. Suffering makes you stupid and desperate, just as wealth makes you stupid as well, and desperate in your own way. So there's the golden mean, again, as I always speak about, as the ancient Greeks talked about, the perfect path. But divination deals with connecting with higher forces. Oh, and now it just occurred to me, let's not forget the old Ouija board. But Ouija boards can be very dangerous, and you have to be very careful when you're doing and using Ouija boards, because they are a fucking open door to the spirit world, and the spirits that are connected to Ouija boards tend to be the worst of them all. Trickster scumbuckets that are stuck on the earth that tell you that they're anything from God to Elvis to everybody else, and they all like to lie, because how are you going to prove it if they tell you they're some prince or princess or whatever? So you have to be very careful, but you can use those as well. The problem with Ouija boards is they are extremely effective and work like crazy, because they have developed and become a portal that the spirit world recognizes, both good and bad. And you have to be very careful using Ouija boards. Cleanse your area, form circles, light candles. There's a whole process to using a Ouija board, which you have to be very careful of, and take those steps. If you do that, you tend to get good information. If you don't, like 99.9% of the people do, anything could come through. And since it's linked to a demonic realms, not only, but I mean the demonic realms love the Ouija board, particularly if it's unprotected, and look out. So, but these can be very great tools if you use them correctly. And that's a form of divination. But divination, when you're using tarot cards and other things, you're connecting with this higher self. That higher self is connected to higher spirit forms. Higher spirit forms are connected towards what we would consider God forms, and we're assuming that we're getting better energy or information that way. So it's much more of a spiritual way of handling. That's what divination is all about. Unlike what I'll get into when I'm talking about pendulums, there's more reading energy fields, and it's very important to understand that, because there's a big difference. And there's a big difference of how these work. So that's why it's important to get into to use some divination form that you are interested in or can key into, because these higher aspects will also assist you. So you will contact the spirits that are connected to those particular realms. So if you're using an Egyptian tarot card set, you're going to tap into the stream of Egyptian divination. And if you're into that, you're going to get better results. But it is very much geared into this higher consciousness. And this is not something that you're using psychic powers with. This is not something that is psychic or biophysical, is a term we use in the occult sciences for psychic, because psychic is such a horrible term. So the biophysical has nothing to do with divination. You're not making things happen. Your psi energies aren't drawing in these things. You have to get past those levels. And you have to understand that when you shuffle a tarot card deck, that higher spiritual powers are arranging those cards the way it should be. When you draw a rune from a bag or several, what's happening there is the spirit or God forms are directing those particular runes to come out that will give you the answers you want. This is not a psychic thing in any way whatsoever. Divination is not a psychic process. So if it becomes a psychic process, and I don't know how that really works, because you're not laying tarot cards out and then psychically picking, oh, this is that card, and picking out. Now, if you're dealing with things like that, and somehow psychically you can figure out what cards are there that you pick out, well, then you're guiding that through your subconscious, and where divination is worthless. Because the whole idea is that you don't want any divination system to be guided by you personally. You're seeking knowledge outside of yourself. You're seeking information from a higher source to assist you. You're not getting information that you feel is right or that you want things to come out in this way. And this is the problem with all types of research in general and with occultism in general, is that if you direct things too much of what you want to have happen, well, then that is strictly getting down to a psychic-based way of doing things, and that has little value depending on what it's doing. So if you're prejudiced psychically and you force something to happen in your, because you want it to come out with ever, or you feel it's bad and then you get a reading that tells you it's bad, or you want something to be good when it is bad, and you force these kind of issues and it becomes a psychic process, well, you don't have a divination system at all. You have a goofed up, moronic system that has no value whatsoever. So the whole idea is when you're doing any kind of divination is you have to go into a, as we always talk about in so many things, is you have to go into a state of total calm and non-prejudice. And this is something that's a problem with all research. It's not, is looking at things and not interpreting them through a giant filter of your personal consciousness, which is warped and screwed up. You just want to look at things and observe the facts, not filter the facts into something that you want to come out in your direction. You know, a lot of people do this, particularly the debunkers, is that they filter everything to come out as that it's all crap. And then, of course, you have the other side of that coin, where you've got everything is a mystical experience, man. You know, I held this little orgone pyramid up to my computer and it stopped a computer attack. I read that online. So the ridiculousness of that is just unbelievable. So you get this kind of stupidity based on the same stupidity of debunkers who are worshiping a already proven to be failed system of arcane idiot science that doesn't work, that doesn't solve any problems, but they're going to make sure that everything comes out with the way they say it, and they're going to find scientists to do that. Of course, as we know, they pick and choose the scientists they like, and the ones that are regular scientists that don't say what they want to hear, oh, they're stupid. They're stupid. They're dumb guys. They got degrees from, I think, from a used car dealer. So the whole idea is you have these kind of problems, and like anything in life, you want to maintain a neutrality. You want to be in neutral, and gather the facts, not try and manufacture a fantasy, which is what a lot of people do to fit their reality. And how true this is, you believe in something, and of course everything that happens proves the truth that you believe in, regardless of whether it connects very well or not. And that's not what a real occult scientist does, that's what an idiot does. So you want to tap into and get connected to that stream, as we always talk about, of divination energy that directs you. And so it's an attitude, and you know, when you do divination and other things, it's always good. You know, it's the psych up again. It's it's like meditation and so forth. If you do it often enough, you don't need to go through a lot of rigmarole to get into deep states of meditation. You pop into that reality. The same thing with magic and everything else. I mean, once you do magic for many months or a few years, when you actually go to do magic, boom, you're right in the magical state where you have to be instantly, because that's how the mind works and the consciousness works. You're a creature of habit. So, divination tools should be respected, kept away from others. A lot of people, when I started out, I used to sleep with my runes, and a lot of people do that with tarot cards. The whole idea is just to mesh the energies as best as possible, make them part of you and part of your reality. It's always good to do things at the same place if you can do it at the same time, and all that depends. It's always nice to, like in magic, you should have magical clothes. This shirt you use for rituals. So it's just a way of keying the mind into that reality. And by instantaneously putting on that shirt, it could be a t-shirt with a magical sign on it, any t-shirt with Yoda on it, whatever it is, you use it specifically for that purpose and that purpose only. And this is a way of triggering your reality. We will be having different t-shirts like that in the future with special designs and sigils and guild logos on it, and other things. So these are nice to have, they're fun to have, but they serve a bigger purpose, is that you're constantly being reminded and put into the magical state of consciousness and connected to the stream of empowerment that the guild has to offer. So they're not just trinkets and toys. They're nice, they're magical tools ultimately, and it does give an element of fun to your reality, and does that. Golfers have cups with golf players on them, or whatever it is that people have with coffee cups of their interest. You should have the same thing as well, and have your own t-shirts and your other things that represent the guild. It's just another way to get into that consciousness, and they can be excellent tools to do that. But that is important. It is important to relax, to turn off the reality that you're in now and tune into the real reality, which is the occult science reality and what you're trying to do. But the more nervous you are, the more freaked out you are, the less centered you are. And it's all about being centering. You can't let anything in life bother you. You have to stay centered. This is difficult to do. And depending on your personality, but that's what you have to do if you want to get to that next step of empowerment, because if you're in a heightened state of emotions, good, bad, or indifferent, you will get terrible results magically and everything else. So you have to maintain a connection, and emotion has no place in magic and in divination in general. Emotions don't serve people, period. So, you need to find that centered, the golden mean. You need to be centered, and this is where you get your best results from. But it's a fantastic skill to have, and it's something you have to use. So if you're going into some particular situation, let's say you have a choice, and of course in this day and age, I don't know if you have choices with doctors, but in a lot of medical plans, you can pick several doctors. Well, pull a divination on it. Should I go to which one of these would be best? Because you'll never know anyway. You can't get any information from everybody. Everybody's lies. The people that say they love something are generally idiots, and you can't get any kind of feedback of value from them. So you have to do that. And you can do that with doctors, lawyers, or any situation. So if you're getting a job, or maybe you want to do that with people, should I trust this person? Well, here's a trend. Now, when you're going with something to pick a doctor, it becomes yes or no, and you have to boil it down to that, and then see what happens, obviously. Other things become more trends, and as I've discussed already. So, but in general, if you work with somebody, you're dealing with a client, should I trust them? What is going on there? How is that feeling? Should I make a trip at that time? These tend to become, from trends, border into this yes and no areas. But in general, things are trends. And as you do things better and get more results and feel comfortable in your divination, you get more and more of these yes or no answers. And of course, as I said, you got to be very careful that you don't fulfill what the oracle is saying instead of taking it as a trend. But there are things you're going to ask yes or no for, and you then have to depend upon your skills and abilities based on your past experiences that these is correct. So you're going to get a yes or no. And should I travel? Is this person going to have a problem? Should I do this? Should I do that? I mean, you work on that, and then, of course, you want to keep records of it. And people have done this with stock markets and made millions. People have done this that have saved their lives, haven't gotten on planes, did not get that operation, that they would have died. And these are the type of things. If Joan Rivers would have been divined, pulled a few tarot cards, a couple of runes, she may be alive today and wouldn't have went to that doctor because they would have said no. Now, the big thing is that instead of taking this is just occult crap. That's not what a occult scientist does. An occult scientist says, this is a fact, I ain't going. And if you have to cancel that 10 minutes before you go, of course you should know that before that, then you do it and you believe in what you're doing and follow through. And, people don't understand. They think some people have great power and so forth and great vision, and they act like that. Yeah, they act like that, and that's the reason why you think they have these, is because they follow through on their talk. There's knowing the path and there's walking the path, and people seem to not quite understand that. And I hear the knowing the path from a lot of people. Most people don't walk the path. Or if they walk the path, they tend to stop and turn around or get off the path very quickly. And of course, like everything in life, that'll end up in disaster. So this is a very important skill that you need to develop, and you need to pick what you like. And if you start off with tarot cards and then you want to get a different deck, if you start off with runes or decide to go in tarot cards, or you just start with tarot cards, you can certainly use multi-divination systems or change over, but there becomes a problem when you start using too many different systems, because then you're not keyed into one. So you do have to settle down to one system and get comfortable with it, like it, and use it. But it doesn't mean that you can't experiment with other things if you feel drawn to them. But here we go again, feeling drawn, which the regular society calls the gut feeling, is really the inner magical being directing you. So the whole idea, if you feel drawn to something, well, listen to that and do it, because that's where you're getting pure information from that works in your life, and not what some guy at the store tells you, or some guy you talk to, or your neighbor, or some idiot online that says, yeah, I like this kind of system. That is not of value to you. What's of value to you is your inner magical being guides that tells you exactly what and how and to choose things, and then you need to jump into it and do it. But having the kind of information or power of knowing the future in this potentially, when you do these things for long periods of time in a very strong and proven way, cannot be discounted. And while you're trying to fight manifesting with different occult rituals and doing other things happen, you can avoid getting into situations, make your life into this smooth path instead of a bumpy path where you are forced to do magic to correct things. Divination will help you, and divination can be used magically in the fact of, should I do magic here? I mean, you can use divination for everything. But the whole idea that the ultimately magic and living the occult science lifestyle is not getting into problems, period. The whole idea is not to fix things, not to use magical glue to fix broken things or try and adjust and fix things in general. The whole idea is to not have problems to begin with and build strong, powerful fields that draw into you what you need in life to make your life go the way you want. And ultimately, that's what the occult sciences is all about. And you use all kinds of tools to do this that fit for your personal purpose and what you key into. Life is very dependent on the individual. While there are bigger areas which fit everyone to some degree, some people look better in some colors, some people look good in polo shirts, other ones don't. So, I mean, we all need clothes, but what clothes is good for you particularly is quite different as well. So you have to modify everything in life to it. But having the abilities and this great, you could call it even a power of being able to foretell or tell the future or know what the trends are coming or avoid serious problems because you were warned by that. And this is a way to get direct questions instead of constantly listening to the inner magical being, which you should be doing anyway, and being guided through life as a general rule, that you have to feel these things, take the messages in, and act upon them. But this is when you can do something very direct. So it's super important to use a type of oracle. And oracles, as I've stated, are based in connecting to higher streams of energies, higher consciousness, higher spirits, and ultimately what we would consider God forms. It is not a sensing mechanism, and it is not in any way biophysical. You want to avoid psychic projections to manifest what you desire. You got to step back from all that, and that's all about being in this centered position where you're not making any judgments, you're not freaked out because you're in a terrible situation and trying to get the answers. This is all about staying centered and connecting with the stream of pure information of what the future holds and what the trends are, and not psychically making something happen the way you want. That's when an oracle becomes worthless. So, as I always say, there is no reality until the occult scientist creates a question everything, believe nothing, question all authority, trust absolutely no one, learn it, be it, do it, and let the guild be your guide.